Friday and hope you had a great week. If you are new to my channel, welcome. My name is Deborah and I'm really excited that you are joining me for today's project. We are going to be working on making a cap. It's my first time making a cap, so what I will do is I will take you through the process. I'm also going to make some recommendations because I made some mistakes along the way and I do not want you to make the same mistakes. So let's get started. All you need is a baseball cap and your seam ripper. You are going to remove the visor with your seam ripper. You're also going to remove one of the panels from the dome of your cap. So I didn't undo the entire cap because I don't need all of the pieces. I obviously need the visor. I also need just one piece of the dome of the cap. This cap had a hole, that opening in the back to slip your ponytail. I do not want my cap or my hat to have that opening. I want it to be completely enclosed. So I am going to replicate this piece and have 6 pieces to create the dome. So I took the piece and I'm folding it in half or folding it on the middle so that I can cut the fabric. I am actually going to make the pieces for the dome a bit bigger than the original because I want the hat to be a bit bigger. So I am going to cut 5 more pieces. And here are my 6 pieces. So if you don't have an existing cap that you can deconstruct to use as a pattern, you can always take measurements of your head. You're going to need the circumference, and that's the largest part of your head or just above your ears. And you're also going to need from front to back. So what you will do with the front to back measurement, you're going to divide it by 2. And what it's going to give you is the length or the height of your dome. For the width, you're going to take the circumference of your head and you're going to divide that by the number of panels you want, and that will give you the width of your panels. It's now time to actually replicate the visor. So I am going to trace the visor. I want the visor to be a little bigger than the original, but first I'm gonna obviously use my fabric marker and trace the visor. Now that I've traced it, as you can see, I want it to be a bit bigger, so I need to add the seam allowance, and I'm going to add a little bit more width around the visor so it can be a bit wider than the original. And I actually have my pieces. I needed to cut 2 pieces for the visor. So here we are. I have the 2 pieces for the visor and my 6 pieces for the dome of the cap. Because I don't want my cap to be floppy, I am going to be using a fusible interfacing. And I'm going to be using 2 types. This is called the Covell, and what I love about it is that it is tear resistant, it's really flexible and easy to sew. There are 2 types. This one is a little bit more rigid. It's thinner, but still it's a little bit more rigid. But what I love about these fusible interfacing is that they keep their body, and it also keeps it keeps the shape. I've used them for making bags and other items for which I need the shape to remain. This one is a little thicker, but it's a lot more flexible. So I am going to be using the most flexible one for the dome, and the one that is more rigid, I am going to be using for the visor. So I've cut 6 pieces to go with my 6 pieces of fabric, It's, as I said, it's fusible interfacing, so I'm going to be able to iron it on the fabric. Now I'm actually going to use, as I said, the more rigid version and going to use it for the visor. I'm probably going to use 2 layers of this just to make it a little bit more rigid, or maybe 3 layers of this interface so that there's a little bit more body to the visor. As I mentioned, I'm going to use 2 layers of this interfacing. I think it will provide more body and more rigidity to the visor. Here are the dome pieces with the fusible interfacing. If you noticed, I didn't remove the seam allowance because this fusible interfacing is really easy to sew through. However, for the visor, the fusible interfacing is a lot more rigid. What I am going to do is I am going to remove the seam allowance before actually fusing the fusible interfacing to my visor. So here it is. I've used 2 layers of the fusible interfacing, the one that is a little bit more rigid. I have ironed it on the wrong face of my fabric. As you can see, it really has a lot of body and it has enough rigidity, but not too much. And as I said, as I cut the seam allowance so that when I am sewing, I'm going to be able to sew all around the seam allowance. So I had this fabric, which is a silk, in my stash, and this is what I'm going to use for the lining of the dome of my cap. Now that I have all my pieces, I'm going to start sewing. I'm going to sew the lining, I'm going to sew the dome, and the last step will be to sew the visor onto the dome of the cap itself. So we are left with 3 pieces: the visor, the dome, the exterior, and the lining. I'm going to sew the exterior dome to the visor first, and then I will sew the lining onto the dome. Here's the visor with the dome. I think the cap is looking really good. So I've pinned the lining to the hat. So I'm leaving the back of the hat open because I will not be sewing the back of the hat, so that I can flip the hat inside out. Now that I've sewn the lining onto the hat, it's time to flip the hat inside out. So here it is, we're almost done. I think it's looking really good. So final steps is to close the opening in the back. We will have to do that by hand. And then also, to keep the lining in place, we'll do a top stitch right around the edge of the dome. And we will be done, and we will have made a cap. And voila, you're ready to wear your cap. If you like this DIY, hit the like button. If you're new to my channel, subscribe, and please share with a friend.